So now a little bit about FDA. And it was funny, I have some discussions with clinicians on FDA, and everybody's focused on this 1271 issue. But at one point, someone said, well, you're only talking about these regulations from industry's perspective. And I agreed with that, because that is the only perspective. FDA only writes regulations for industry. They have nothing to do with the practice of medicine. They don't want to be involved in it, nor should they be involved with it, nor do they have any jurisdiction over the practice of medicine. So FDA regulates the marketing and promotion of drugs and devices, not the practice of medicine. There also is this concept, it's called a concept of substantial deference. And so what the courts have said is, the FDA, they write the rules. So if you come in and say, well, no, this is what the rules mean, the court says, no, they wrote them. They get to tell you what they mean. You can't go in and interpret them differently from what they say the interpretation is. And they have this concept where you can get a request for designation. So if you're unsure where you stand with the FDA, go in front of them and get a request for designation. They'll tell you what you need to do to be in compliance. So I can go in front of the FDA and say, here's what I'm doing. It's a formal document you submit to them. What's my regulatory profile? What do I have to do to be in compliance with your rules and regulations? And they'll tell you. So if you're unsure, you can ask them. And remember, theirs is really the only interpretation that matters. When it ultimately gets to the courts are going to say, they wrote the rules. They get to tell you what they mean. So the worldview from the FDA is, clinicians, you have cleared devices and drugs, and you practice medicine however you want. Industry, we're not allowed to promote or sell drugs off-label. I can't walk into, Dr. Tortland's office and say, hey, this great hair tonic, put it on your head and it's going to grow hair. I'm stuck with whatever indications for use the FDA gives me. And the guidance from the FDA is to industry. They regulate industry. Guidance isn't to practicing clinicians. So I think of if I were a clinician, and again, this is industry's view, there's kind of 3 categories of sins. You use an approved device off-label. Now, everybody does that. I don't think anyone is, looking to cause a problem with that. Second one is, you make your own device. Well, even that sometimes doesn't matter, because you think of an orthopedic surgeon, they have a sterile cup in the field. I take that bone graft material, I put it in the sterile cup, I form it into the shape I want it to, and then I use it. Well, someone might say, well, that sterile cup, now it's a bone graft delivery tool. That should be a cleared device. That's silly. So this one here, I'm not sure people, are looking at that seriously. The third one is, you create a franchise and you're going to make devices, sell them through your franchise. And now I'm entering the world of being in the medical device. I now crossed the barrier. Now you do fall into the FDA's world because you're promoting a device. You're promoting and selling a device. Can't do that and not follow FDA rules. Now you're part of industry. So if you're part of industry, now FDA has real teeth. And they can make a real problem for you. For example, we've just seen this with the US stem cell. And both of these people in the past, as Mark Berman and Kristen Kamel, nice people, I think their hearts are in the right places. I remember having lunch with both of them on 2 different occasions a few years ago. Both of them independently said to me, we're in communication with the FDA. They know what we're doing. If they had a problem with us, they would have already done something. And then lo and behold, 2 years later, it's not even the FDA now who is going to prosecute the case. They turned it over to the Justice Department. That should, give everybody a bit of pause. The last time I heard them speaking, I think they were forming a GoFundMe page to help pay their legal bills. Why did FDA consider US stem part of industry? Some people say, well, because it was collagenase or it was, no. They're selling a pharmaceutical, they're selling a drug, and they didn't do the proper clearance. It doesn't matter what the drug is or what the device is. If you enter the world of industry and you're in selling medical devices and you didn't get a clearance, that's where you have a problem. And why did they send it over to the DOJ? because it was almost like a willful disregard. The FDA asked them to stop. They said, you can't make us stop. And they were like, you know what? Just turn it over to the Justice Department. I mean, does the federal government have the ability to regulate devices and drugs? I would say they do.
If guidance is not directed at clinicians, why do they shut down clinics?
They shut down clinics because the clinics were part of industry. The clinics were making devices or pharmaceuticals and selling them. They're not shutting down clinics that have anything to do with the practice of medicine. They don't regulate the practice of medicine. When you look at those court cases, it's all going to be around you have entered industry, you're making a drug, you're making a device, and you're selling it. That's why the FDA goes in and shuts down a clinic. They have no authority to shut down a clinic based on practice of medicine.
Are clinicians becoming manufacturers when they create bone marrow concentrate in a practice?
It depends. And I think it depends. In my opinion, the real problem is the franchise models, because the franchise model is actually in business to sell devices to the franchisees. And now I am making a device and selling a device. If I'm just in my practice and I say, you know, I think I want to tailor my biologic for this particular patient in a particular way, and I have a way to do it, I don't think the FDA has a concern about that. The concern is commercialization. That's why I said, like, you know, I have a sterile cup and I'm putting something in the sterile cup. Is that a bone graft delivery kit? No one's looking at that. But if I go out and I say, I have a great bone graft delivery kit and I'm selling it to everybody, I've got a problem. Another analogy, I have a great buddy of mine I play racquetball with. He's in the manufacturing business. He makes screws, plates, rods, you know, for the marine industry, for all different kinds of industry, not aircraft industry, not medical. He broke his leg playing, he's a goofball, playing soccer with his kids in the backyard. He goes to the hospital and they have titanium screws and plate. And he looks at it, it was like $700 per screw, something ridiculous. He goes, I could make that for $4, implant grade titanium screw. He goes, imagine now if he did that. He said, okay, I'm going to make these implant grade titanium screws, plates. I'm going to go to this surgery center over here. I'm going to say to the surgery center, I can sterilize them too. I mean, I have all that capability in my plant. I'm going to sell you the plates, rods, and screws. I'm going to sell them to you for next to nothing, and you're going to treat patients, and we're all going to save money. And maybe you do this for 10 years, and all the patients do really well because guess what? It's the same thing. But someone knocks on your door someday, you say you broke the law. The only reason you're able to do that so cheaply is you broke the law. And will they prosecute it? Will they not? Who knows? You know, there's a lot of crimes that go unprosecuted, but it's analogous to that. You can't just enter the space and start selling devices without someday, somehow, something may happen. So it's a question of commercialization. I always say follow the money. If you're in the business of selling devices, you fall under the FDA's guidance. If you're in the business of practicing medicine, treating patients, FDA wants nothing to do with you.
Andy, you say that the FDA is not in the business of regulating the practice of medicine, and yet they say that we cannot culture expand cells in the office because that's a violation of FDA. Even if we're not connected with industry, they will not allow us to grow and culture a patient's cells and then re-inject them, at least here in the United States. So, at least as far as I understand. So how is that not interfering with the practice of medicine?
So, with respect to culturing and growing cells and then re-injecting them, they would say, it's because, you know, I get a little outside my pay grade here, but I'll give you my best understanding, is that there are certain parts of what you're using to do that cross state lines. So either the culture medium or any of the manufacturing equipment. So since it crosses state lines, it falls under the Commerce Clause, and so the government can regulate it. So the government can regulate that process. Then they're saying, okay, are you in the practice of medicine when you're growing these cells out? Or are you part of industry? Are you selling them? Are you charging your patients? So if I'm selling a device and I'm promoting that that device is going to help these patients, or a pharmaceutical in the case of cultured cells, they're going to say you're promoting and selling a device off-label against, you know, contravening federal law. So that would be their argument. Let's say you were doing that or someone was doing that and only in their practice and they weren't advertising it, you'll never hear from them. But if you start advertising and then trying to promote it and sell it to other doctors, you're going to hear from them. You're entering the pharmaceutical world. They regulate that. So that's, I think, when do you cross that line is promotion and sales. Are you in the business? Have you entered the pharmaceutical business? Have you entered the device business? If you have, they may knock on your door. I think that's the kind of the gray line. And so people are like, and then if you think of that black line or gray line, you think of all the guidance the FDA issues. 1271 is this much of something that goes ceiling to floor times 100. If you're in the device industry and you're in the pharmaceutical industry, it all pertains to you, not just that one. Why are you only reading that one? Everything pertains to you, or nothing pertains to you. You don't get to pick and choose which ones pertain to you, and you don't get to pick how to interpret it. Again, that concept of substantial deference. If you're not sure, get a request for designation. They'll tell you. Now, having gone through all this process, I can tell you exactly what they'll say on anything you're going to submit because it's already been done. I guess if my advice on this one in the end would be, if you're doing stuff in your office and you're quiet about it and you're treating patients the right way, you'll never hear from them. If you try and get into the business of being in devices or pharmaceuticals, you may hear from them. If you're thinking of joining a franchise, so I'm the franchisee, franchisor, and I'm going to be a franchisee. And, when I go to join the franchise, I ask for, what correspondence with FDA. Show me your request for designation. Show me that what I'm going to do here isn't contravening federal law. And they say, oh, don't worry about it. We're fine. We can even have our attorney tell you you're fine. My advice would be hire your own attorney. Show them exactly what you're doing and ask that attorney and have that attorney put it in writing. Am I contravening federal law as part of this organization or not? And if it's gray and maybe you are, well, at least you know. But why? Life's too short. But at the end of the day, they regulate industry. They don't regulate practice of medicine. They don't want to get involved in physicians' practices. They only do it if physicians decide, I'm going to join industry, but not the right way. And that kind of sums it up simply. And then if I look at, people out there, from what I can tell, there's no FDA clearances on their protocols or equipment. Selling has claimed it's a Class 1 device, but I'll tell you right now, I know the FDA doesn't recognize that position. Because I've asked them for a request for designation, and they said, nope, we don't recognize that. What will they do with selling? Maybe nothing, but they won't. If you go out there saying you're Class 1 exempt, you're still a medical device. You still have to follow all the rules like sterility validation, incoming inspection, all that. But they don't recognize that position. Harvest, BMAC, and MSite, those are Class 2 devices, but they have no in vivo indication for use. They have black box warnings that say the safety and effectiveness of this device has not been cleared for use. It was through the Office of Diagnostics at CDRH. And if you look at their instructions for use, there's nothing in the instructions for use that allows you to put it back on the field. If it did have an in vivo use, like all their other products like BRP and FAT, there's instructions for use. It's required how to put it back on the field. So these are diagnostic only. And then all the other ones are for making PRP from a mixture of peripheral blood and marrow. So if I want to use arteriocyte on label, Magellan's system on label, I have to take 2/3 blood from a venipuncture, 1/3 from marrow aspirate, combine the two, centrifuge it, create my concentrate, and then that's only cleared for mixing with bone chips for use in orthopedic surgery. That's their indications for use. Now, if you're using these for injection therapy off-label, nobody's going to care. Nobody cares. And even with this, no one's ever going to knock on your door on this, I don't think. And if FDA ever has a problem with the people who say they're class 1, it's not with a clinician. You've got a device, you've got a label on it, you've got a sticker. They're going to just say, hey, I'm going after selling. The upper one, I don't know. That's going to be a gray matter if it ever happens.